is Mishka, Mishin, or Mish for short, and I really like to say welcome to those of YouTube or fandoms or whoever you prefer. Let me just have to give a little bit of this awareness and a message for you guys. For some, you guys can see my title about this blog here. To be honest, this is my story. I am diagnosed with a learning disability, but all this time growing up until recognizing the signs and symptoms I've been experiencing while growing up from my infant child days to the adulthood, I am diagnosed being on the spectrum. And to be honest with you guys, I never realized that. Well, you're wondering, what does it feel like being on the spectrum, even if you never even know what you have? Well, it's not really simple for me. And to be honest, I never realized that. So basically, from my parents' point of view, when I was about to start my pre-kindergarten while starting August Aarons Elementary, which is located inside the island of Oahu, one of the Hawaiian Islands. Before I start pre-kindergarten, I believe, I'm starting to get to a doctor somewhere in the middle of Providence, uptown, downtown, I think. And it was so hard for me to remember, but I was so young, I still didn't understand what they're trying to test me and what I'm diagnosed with. And basically from growing up during these elementary years, just the same time I've been dealing with so many uncontrollable but noticeable things with the bullying, misunderstanding, or miscommunication from not just the classmates, but mostly from teachers and sometimes EAs, whatever they prefer. I've been noticing that not only that I have the learning disability, but claimed by my parents I'm having a speech problem, which I didn't understand, but it's hard for me to speak out for myself. But masking, I didn't understand that till later on when I reached the adulthood. So I wasn't so sure how to put into words or say the right synthesis, or I didn't want to wish to get any error grammar or whatever, because any mistakes I made, it would end up making me feel like that I'm the failure or incorrect or X mark. It really upsets me a lot. And to be honest, I know there's some autistic kids in my class, which I didn't understand that. Some of them are high functioning, some of them are low functioning, but it depends on the behavioral issues, what they claim in IEPs, how they dealt with them over the years growing up with me, before they come and go as they please. So at least growing up in just August Aarons, before around November 2004 that I moved out to go to school at Waikele Elementary. But over for the last several years, well, my pre-kindergarten year to kindergarten year, through the first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade, I'm still pretty much being childish back then, which I still don't understand yet. And the problem is, I pretty much not really sure what I was doing back then. And what's so crazy while growing up, I really felt like I got it all on how to make friends, how to interact with them, and how I'm supposed to fit in. Well, I've been noticing when I was growing up, I given myself to be fitted into different classes, like anytime during those lunch or period hours. But I didn't have those period hours. There's pretty much assigned from a schedule. I would be starting school in the regular homeroom, then full the regular eds, and just before the next bell ring, I had to be sent to the special needs and then heading back. Well, it's just hard for me just to keep up. And sometimes I end up getting to the teacher, sometimes thinking about how to practice with my special needs of a learning disability, having speech problem. But there is a reason why to all that. I have a really, really terrible memory of my childhood days. But I don't want to bring this up personally. It has nothing to do with school. As the saying goes, school and home has to be separate. School's at school and home's at home. Family business should stay in the family. But it's not the case. It pretty much affected me when I was so young. It really hurts. First, like, being up by a belt. Sure, it's discipline, but it didn't add up there. And saying some bad, swearing, profanity words that really affect me for quite some time, and I end up hurting someone back. Like, the adults in my family, they hurt me. That affected me into hurting kids close to my age the same way how they have hurt me. Is it sounds obvious enough? Okay, so moving on to these few years to the second grade. It's gonna be a really crazy roller coaster for me to explain. And that's kind of like the first or second semester, but to me, personally, it may be the first semester. It was during lunchtime, that second grade year. There was this young little boy I used to like who was in my class, even though he was the regular ed and he didn't know I was in the special needs. I thought he would like me. And by the time lunchtime comes around, and I always be the last kind of kid, always be at the back of the line because of our assigned names. Well, not our first name, but our last names. It didn't really make any sense for him to be having a little of a disagreement with his friend. Even though he was only a little kid back then, and he and him have a little disagreement about whatever conversation they have, they were like, It's hard for me to make up the words, and I can't remember. But by the looks of his facial expression, which was really got me to a shock, because I have never ever seen a guy that I used to like, well, a little boy I used to like way back then, he can start a confrontation to his friend in the middle of lunchtime. And to this point, I was feeling shaking, sweating, and paralyzed, terrified. I had to get away from the conversation of the tension, right into the other side of where the classroom might be. Well, the outside of the classroom might be. I started to cry, and by the time I finished up, I went back, and by the time he and the friend kind of did it again in the same lunch line, and we were supposed to get our lunch, but that's not the case. It may be the second or third time he kind of went a little too far. That's when I didn't know I have an anxiety attack. When that affected to me having overwhelming empathy or such, it really triggered my anxiety so bad. And I didn't understand what anxiety is when I was so young. And anxiety was never part of the vocabulary in my head. I immediately began to get myself out of the line. I had to say, I can't be able to eat my lunch because of what happened. I can't really face it up to the kids. And by the time I just broke down mentally and emotionally, crying my eyes out, seeing some couple of cookie crumbs, Oreo crumbs right beside me as I cried the whole hour. Well, by the time that lunch to recess was ending, well, that very same day, I kind of felt like I had the right to feel that I need to let all my tears out. I had to cry and bawl. And by the time I finished up, I was still emotionally drained and numb to this point. I couldn't talk to anyone. In that case, that's when I never noticed until I grew up, having the chance to learn what's like to have autism or any of these disorders, signs and symptoms. It makes sense. I learned that from my friend from the Autism Awareness Group. And most of all, importantly, learned this from some of other educational group like Psych2Go and Medicine Explained. So, back to this point. By the time when I got into my classroom of Hormone H2, it's kind of like the H building of August Aaron's. I may not know if it's still there or not. The first and last time I saw my crush, who's the boy that I used to like, I was in a loss of words, and I'm not really sure what to say. He kind of walked up to me at my desk and sort of asked me this really honest yet important question, but it's not like a mad or angry or harsh kind of voice or tone. It's kind of like he's really shocked that I was crying. I was not really having curly hair back then. I mean, not really having this straight hair back then. I was pretty much the African American Filipino mix, crying, having a learning disability, and having these symptoms that I didn't even understand. That kind of question he asked, "Are you going to tell the teacher on me?" I was so surprised, yet nervous, but feel like I'm shaking inside. I couldn't say anything. I can't say any answer to him. I couldn't respond. And the reason why I couldn't respond, I am so afraid. I wouldn't tell him what really affected me, and I'm even afraid to ask him why would he ask me this question. Well, I still like him, not as the crush, but as a friend, as I really want to be his friend. But I know to this day he grown up from his years of schools and went to the Marine Corps. But all these years, I had this gut feeling as much as he does. Someone was overwatching what really did happen that day. And I was so sure it was the teachers, but it isn't, or the students. But who?